3, 2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of Grok Talk, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GraniteGrok.com. We are your feared, extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com.
Grok Talk.
Welcome back to Grok Talk, brought to you by GraniteGrok.com and CNHT, the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. Check us out at GraniteGrok.com. Check them out at CNHT.org. And listen to this or past programs on Stitcher, Spreaker, iTunes, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, ACNation.com, and on YouTube and Ustream. Trying to make us as available to you as we possibly can.
And formerly on Blip TV.
Formerly. Those are the last episodes, yes.
Way
back like a year and a half ago or whatever, you know. All right, and next week is episode 75, so we've been doing this for a little while now. It's getting pretty good.
Second version. Grok Talk 2.0.
Okay, yes, and we're going to continue with
Rebooted.
Grok Talk 2.0 because we have a guest on the phone who was kind enough to get up this morning way out in Los Angeles to give us his perspective on what they do there at the 10th Amendment Center and the election we just had. Welcome to the program, Michael Boldin.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, great to have you here. How's it going out there?
Well, you know, it's bright and early, and we're ready to roll. I'm here in the state's rights capital of the country, Los Angeles, California.
That is such a strange conundrum that the states' rights center for the country is in fact located in one of the most left-leaning locations.
Yeah, Mexico North.
Well, even if it isn't, I like to have a positive attitude about my hometown. But we saw some very interesting things happen in the election. I know a lot of the pundits want to talk about what happened in Washington D.C. and in Congress. But being the 10th Amendment Center, we believe that the most effective solution is the closest you get to the individual. Because if we're talking about advancing individual liberty, the best solution to promoting that is a solution that comes close to home, and that, under the Constitution, is the states. And there were a number of states, primarily Arizona, which show, I think, a blueprint for the type of action that can happen. I saw a blog a couple of days ago about how there were more free staters and New Hampshire Liberty Alliance people elected and reelected in the state house there in New Hampshire. And I know you guys with Maggie are going to have a little trouble getting things signed into law, but I think the time is now to really start building up steam on the state-level action that take many times a few years to get done. For example, Arizona Proposition 122. This is a new state constitutional amendment just passed by the people by a razor-thin majority in Arizona that now puts in the state constitution that the people there can determine when they want to. It's basically a federal law or federal regulation review. If they do not want to participate in or use any state resources in the enforcement of a particular federal law, they now have a very easy mechanism to make that happen. I mean, it's not like super easy, but much easier than it would have been without this. And it makes it front and center to the people of Arizona now, and it should be to the whole country, that states can take action to say, you know what, we're not going to participate in this. It's actually putting in a larger scale what you guys did there in New Hampshire in the general court a few years ago, which was banning the states from running an exchange. I mean, that's a very simple version of this, but it should be applied to basically everything, because very little of what the federal government does is actually constitutional. Their gun laws, their health care programs, their education, their environmental programs, all this stuff should be determined by the people of each state as the Founding Fathers created.
Isn't the Arizona proposition, in fact, the codification of what Sheriff Richard Mack did back in the Clinton administration, where he basically said, I'm not going to use my state resources to enforce your unconstitutional federal law?
That's a great question, and actually 2 points on that. First of all, the federal government, let's make it clear, they absolutely do not have the resources to enforce all the things that they pass. The mountain of regulations that come out every single day, the bureaucratic law is what a lot of people call it, plus all the laws already on the books. We know they can't get it done all one has to do is look at the city of Denver, where they have legalized marijuana as an example. It would cost the DEA their yearly budget, their entire budget for the year, just to stop one city from defying them. So if we were going to apply this same principle on every other thing that they do that they shouldn't do, we know that they cannot stop the states when enough of them stand up and say no. So that's extremely important. And then the other part of that, this case, Sheriff Mack, he basically said this is the Brady, the Brady campaign, their Brady bill that was passed. And he said, look, you guys may pass this, and you're asking me to do the enforcement of it on a local level? Absolutely not. He went to the Supreme Court in a very unusual situation. The Supreme Court ruled very well. This doesn't happen too often. And they basically said, and the short version was, that the state and the local communities or the political subdivisions cannot be required to expend resources or manpower in the enforcement of federal laws or regulatory schemes. There's actually 4 major court cases that go back from 1842 all the way to the Obamacare case, the Sebelius case of 2012, that all reaffirm this same principle known as the anti-commandeering doctrine. If you think of it like a pirate, well, the federal government is like a group of pirates, and they're trying to rob you of your resources and force you to use them in ways that they want you to do. And that's what they do every single day with your local police, enforcing their gun laws, enforcing their regulatory programs. Even something as simple as in New Mexico a couple of years ago, it was the U.S. Forest Service. They were trying to stop people from using or clearing out a certain area of a forest for whatever reason it was locally. But the people there really needed it done. Well, they needed the local sheriff to come out and help them try to enforce this. And when that stopped happening, the Forest Service wasn't able to pull this off. We saw in Wisconsin during the so-called shutdown that they couldn't even get a single park shut down because they were actually relying on the state to shut down the parks because the federal government doesn't have the manpower. That's not to say that the federal government isn't dangerous. It certainly is. It is threatening you at almost every turn that you make, that if you don't do something a certain way, or in some situations that we know, if you do nothing, they're going to fine you. If you don't pay their fine, they want to come and get you. So they're dangerous, but we do have to recognize in great numbers when enough people actually say, I'm sick of this, I'm not going to participate in this anymore, and enough states pass laws backing them up, there's not much that the feds can do to force their so-called laws down our throats.
Michael, this is Skip, and I want to say thanks for coming on the show. One of the most underreported stories has been because we hear so much from the Democrats and a lot of the liberal pundit heads that the Republican Party is only a regional party in the South, and it's not a national party anymore simply because it can't seem to get a president into the Oval Office. But yet, when you look at the state level, especially after this last election, you've seen the onward march. It's almost like Sherman's march through to Atlanta, in that the Republicans are taking over the states in large numbers. You look at Nevada, Harry Reid's home state, and it just flipped totally Republican. You look at the map, where the legislatures have gone either full Republican control or half control, and it's pretty much 2/3 of all of the state legislative houses, with a majority of the legislative seats have turned red from blue. And my question to you, even though I want to say here in New Hampshire that the Republican Party is still the junior lackeys of the welfare state, they just think they can manage it better. Does this help what the 10th Amendment Center keeps trying to push, which is more sovereignty for the individual states? Do you see more of the Republicans being more apt to say, federal government, leave us alone?
I actually believe that on a state level, you'll find more that are more apt to do that. I don't have much faith in anything happening in Washington, D.C. If you look at a chart of growth of government, not necessarily economic, but their entire power, it's always getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And in fact, James Madison personally advised, he wrote in Federalist number 46. And most people aren't taught this, of course, because we go to government-run or government-approved schools, and they don't want us to know how to stop them. He gave us 4 steps on what we're supposed to do when the federal government does unconstitutional, he called it unwarrantable acts, or even just merely unpopular. Something doesn't have to be unconstitutional for us to try to stop it. So for even those few things that they do that are constitutional, if they make a bad choice, Madison gave us 4 particular steps. One of the most important one of those that I saw in Federalist 46 is what he called repugnance, and he defined that as a refusal to cooperate with officers of the Union. And he said if enough states were to do this, it would create these roadblocks. He didn't use that term, but in modern parlance, he create roadblocks that the federal government would be hardly willing to encounter. In other words, this is a really effective way of doing it. And yes, on a local level, it is Republicans and independents on certain issues that are going to be more willing to stand up to Washington, D.C. And I'll tell you what, surprisingly enough, on a local and state level, it is sometimes the people from Greens and Democrats that are willing on particular issues. So, for example, industrial hemp farming. I know there's been a bill that's been introduced there in New Hampshire for a few times. This is a very important thing. Nikki Haley down in South Carolina actually just signed a similar bill a few months ago that conservatives and liberals alike should recognize, you know what, this is a very, very important crop that our farmers should be growing. It is used for tens of thousands of products. It was a big part of the World War II war effort for rope and clothing. Why does the federal government not permit us to do this? Well, this is something where you can build alliance with the left, and it doesn't happen very often, but you can do that on a state level, and then you can have a strong coalition to reject federal power, and then use that to as a launch pad into doing things on other issues, like on the right to keep and bear arms. I don't think any state should ever put a single penny or a single individual into helping the federal government enforce any federal law or regulation on the right to keep and bear arms. It is totally unconstitutional, every single one of them. We already saw Idaho just this last year pass a bill saying that anything new, they basically drew a line in the sand and said, you know, it may be bad enough now, but if you try to pass anything new, well, we're not going to participate in that. Now, if we see 5, 10 states do that, they could pass all the new laws that they want on the right to keep and bear arms, trying to limit it, but they're just not going to be able to get them enforced. And I think the time is now. You talk about all these Republicans who are basically sweeping in the State House. Well, the time is now to get it done while the ability to be stronger happens. Because you know what, in 2016, and I don't know if she's going to win, in 2016, we all know that Hillary Clinton is going to run for president. That is extremely dangerous for the right to keep and bear arms and many other issues. Well, before that potential nightmare happens, I believe that time to build a strong fortress in the state has to be done. It has to be done right now when we have the great opportunity to make it happen.
And I agree with you completely, Michael. That, you know, the opportunity for the states to constrain the federal government is about as good as it's going to be for quite some time. And you know, whilst to some of us on the right it makes us shudder to think about cooperating with liberals, I have to remember that A, you began that way, and B, and B, there is lots of common cause, not common core, between right and left when it comes to telling the federal government to butt the heck out. It may be that at a national level, progressives want to control everybody and everything. But at a local level, there are things that liberals want to be left alone on.
Well, you know what, Mike? You stumbled a little bit there with Common Core, but I've actually noticed, even in states like New York, the people on the left want to stop Common Core as well. It's not that they don't want government control over education. It's not like that the motive is pure, because they want a different type of government-run education. It doesn't matter. If the end result is stopping Common Core, that will open the door. It's the crack. It's the foot in the door that we need to take it to the next level. And maybe those short-term allies from the left aren't going to take it to the next level. But if they help us get there, that's a wonderful thing. I don't really trust most politicians on any level. But I will work with those who want to do something right from time to time.
The chance for us to use their backs as a stepping stone instead of the other way around is delicious. But
It sounds nice, doesn't it?
Yeah, but when I said Common Core is not Common Core, I didn't mean that they were not interested in repudiating Common Core.
Sure.
Many in the teachers' unions are interested in that too. I was just making sure that similar sounding words didn't get confused.
Yeah. Right.
So, Skip, do you have a question?
One of the things that I think I remember you talking about in the past has been jury nullification, whereby a sitting of our peers in a legal case should have the right to be able to tell the judge and everyone else, we think that this law is unjust, therefore we are determining an innocent result here. And a judge, I think it was a federal judge here in New Hampshire, basically shot that all down, even though we passed a law for jury nullification. Do you or have you heard of any other instances from around the country that have gone similarly?
Well, actually, New Hampshire is basically the front line when it comes to jury nullification. This is a very important natural right of the people to be able to say, you know what, we collectively as a jury, and I'm not talking about collectivism, for example, but a group of people saying, you know what, we don't think this law is just. So even though the facts of the case say the person may have violated, we're going to vote to acquit. And this is basically the last line of defense against an overreaching government, whether it's state, local, or federal, where it's the people. It's the choice of the people to say, you know what, we're not going to participate in this. And, it was used very powerfully back in the 1850s against federal slavery laws. They were trying to require northern states to capture runaway slaves and send them down into the South without any due process, nothing. And in the state of New York, Syracuse is very well known for this. There was basically a trial of some 50, 60 people, and only one person was actually convicted because juries were saying, you know what, we don't care. You shouldn't be doing this. You don't have any authority to do this, and they couldn't convict anybody. And this is a very powerful roadblock to the federal government or to any government. Unfortunately, though, you talk about the court case, and yes, the courts I don't think can be trusted. Any court that can say that you can be taxed for doing nothing with how that whole Affordable Care Act thing, I mean, the courts just cannot be trusted. Once in a while they get it right, but if we're putting our faith, our liberty, into the hands of 9 unelected, unaccountable, politically connected lawyers, we are in a lot of trouble because that's not the system the Founding Fathers. It's supposed to be equal parts, and that's the 3 branches of the federal government plus all of the states, all standing up, and sometimes there's conflict. Sometimes the courts say something and the states do something different, or the Congress does something different, or vice versa. And that's how it's supposed to be. And the more conflict between these branches and these areas of government, the greater the chance our liberty has to grow.
Okay, I got another question that may be a little bit off topic here, but it does talk about the proper role of government at the various levels, legislation in the Supreme Court, and liberty and freedom, where we are now seeing King versus Burrell coming to the fore. And this is the case where the Obamacare law says that only those states that have their own exchanges can the IRS issue the subsidies, that if a state is using a federal generated site like here in New Hampshire, those subsidies should not and cannot be provided by the IRS. The IRS decided in and of its own to make a ruling that, oh, yes, we can. Now, that's a problem for 36 of the states where taxpayers now have to, for our listeners who may be unfamiliar with this, the IRS is paying the subsidies for all of that stuff. That's the only way this thing becomes affordable. Not affordable for taxpayers, but affordable for those who receive the subsidies. This may, and the language is very plain, very clear in the actual writing of the law, as opposed to Chief Justice Roberts ruling that Obamacare was constitutional because it was a tax. How do you think that they're going to rule on this?
Well, my gut tells me they're going to find some way to sneak out of it, but it's possible that they'll take the right position. First of all, let's be clear. If they rule the right way and say that they can only do these subsidies in states where there are federally run exchanges, you mentioned there's 36 states that have opted to say, you know what, we're not going to do this. Well, that means Obamacare is pretty much done. But even if they rule the other way, even if they screw it up, which wouldn't be too surprising to me, the states that are saying we aren't going to participate in this exchange, they are still crippling the federal government. If 14 more states did it, it would still be nearly impossible. The federal government does not have the resources. I mean, we saw how hard it was for them just to get one of these websites set up. They are totally incompetent. They're totally undermanned. They don't know what they're doing. This is an industry that they shouldn't be involved in, and to have them try to run it is one of the best ways to get it to screw up. So those states, I know New Hampshire, Mike told me the other day that New Hampshire was second. I thought New Hampshire was first to say no to the exchange. But this is a very powerful weapon. And again, it reaffirms that if you don't start on a state level, this court case wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the state saying we're going to opt out and creating this conflict with the federal government. So in those situations where sometimes the court can do the right thing, it would be nice to see that happen. The only reason this would happen is because the state has said we're not going to participate in this part of the Affordable Care Act. This was affirmed under the Sebelius case in 2012, the famous Obamacare decision, where states did not have to participate in, for example, the expansion of Medicaid. They couldn't be forced to do that. So every state, no matter what the turnout of that case is, should stop running exchanges, should look again at the situation of the Medicaid expansion, or is it Medicare? I can't even think that.
Medicaid.
Yes, Medicaid expansion. And pass legislation saying we're not going to do this anymore if we are already. These are very powerful tools to make very difficult situation for the Affordable Care Act to exist, because they need this participation to run smoothly.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Michael. And the idea of burying the federal government under its own laws is quite sweet. The danger, of course, is that they either A, just keep printing the money to make this stuff sort of work, or B, that they use this as the excuse to try and go single payer, which is going to be even worse. But the other side of the coin in the states, the one is, well, we're not going to run the exchange, so you can't have subsidies in our state. The other side of the coin is that without the state running an exchange, the federal government, according to the original law, is not allowed to exact penalties from individuals or corporations in the state. And that's part of the reason behind at least one of these lawsuits.
Yeah, and it just goes back to if you just simply comply as soon as the federal government passes what they call a law, or the Supreme Court says you have to, and your state goes along with it, basically it's game over. It could have been game over after the Sebelius case. But all of these states started taking these actions. There were good people at Cato Institute and Goldwater, of course, here at 10th Amendment Center, who were pushing the states to actually take these types of actions and saying no piece by piece, piecemeal, breaking it down. And it's created a situation where, hey, they're going to have to defend it again. And the more times we do this, the greater chance we're going to have of getting it done. I don't trust John Boehner or Mitch McConnell to actually do the right thing in Washington, D.C. I don't think anyone in their right mind should.
We don't.
I know you guys don't. But you know what? If they do the right thing because they have great pressure on them, that's wonderful. I don't think it would be sustained for all eternity. So this is, again, the time to build that bulwark in the states and create the stumbling blocks for the federal government to be able to get done what they want to do to you.
Michael, are you going to be traveling around doing any speaking anytime soon?
I actually have avoided some traveling lately. It does take a lot of energy, and I hate being violated the way that the TSA, that's an organization that should not exist. So this is a time of year where I'm going to focus on setting up for the state legislative sessions all around the country in January, spend a little time with family at home, and then really kick some butt come January.
You have some specific states that you're looking at?
I was going to say, can we get
Well,
you over here?
well, Arizona is a biggie now that they passed Proposition 122. We're looking at a number of ways where we can use that to actually reject federal regulations and federal acts. Missouri is always a place where we're going to see a strong right to keep and bear arms stance. We hope to follow up in Idaho with a stronger bill to reject federal gun laws. A number of states like South Carolina and others are going to be taking action against Obamacare. It's all across the board. There's a hearing in November, just in a couple of weeks, in Utah to turn off the water to the NSA facility there. They're collecting all that information. So hopefully we can get enough people at that hearing in Salt Lake City to support the legislation to shut down the NSA in Utah. So all across the spectrum around the country, we're seeing state-level activity against Washington, D.C.
That's a nice and relatively peaceful way to turn a piece of the federal government into a smoking crater. That place sucks so much power that they have all sorts of nasty internal glitches on the power grid that already blows up some of the equipment. If we can get it to overheat as well, it'll be nice.
It would be historic. I think it would be absolutely incredible. Well, Nevada actually did this a few years ago against the Department of Energy, and even the federal court said, hey, when it comes to western states, you have to respect their water rights, and this is Utah's water. If they actually have the backbone to do this, I don't know if it'll happen, but there's a very courageous legislator who's a member of us here at the 10th Amendment Center, Mark Roberts, who has taken the position that, look, this is something we at least have to go for, and this is it could be a very good blueprint on how you stop federal agencies from doing things. I'd like to see some IRS agents' offices kind of go that route myself.
All right, we're running to the end of the segment. How do people reach out to you?
Just go to 10thamendmentcenter.com. There's loads of information there. That's the first thing I want people to do is read. You go to actually 10thamendmentcenter.com/report, and you're going to get this huge 30-page free document on the status of the state-level movement around the country.
That's wonderful, and I actually posted the article about the Arizona proposition, so there's links on there to the article and to the 10th Amendment Center itself. So, folks, just check out our homepage. You'll see how to get there, so you don't have to type 10thamendmentcenter.com all in one long string to get there.
That sounded like a dig.
No. It's very descriptive, but people are lazy about typing.
That is
we are
true.
all friends, so it's okay in this situation. I really appreciate you guys, by the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for all you do. Any chance we'll get you out here early in our legislative session? I'm sure that a number of our newly elected members would love to have a meeting.
I would like to try to work that out sometime for January sometime, so let's talk soon.
All right, thank you so much for being with us, Michael. Have a great weekend.
Thanks you so much.
Take care.
Have a great day.
All right, that's Grok Talk for whatever day today is, November 8th, 2014. Next week we have Jonathan Last, senior writer from the Weekly Standard, and we're going to craft a show around his message, which I will tell you more about throughout the week. So go to GraniteGrok.com, GraniteGrok.com, and check us out.
Yes.
We're out of here. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, baby! When asked whether she still supports Obamacare, Senator Jeanne Shaheen said,
yes, I do continue to support the law. We're beginning to see some positive results.
how can Senator Shaheen say we're seeing positive results when 22,000 of our neighbors have already lost their health insurance? What's worse, the Boston Globe reports the state's only health insurance provider radically reduced the number of hospitals in their network, forcing some people to drive over an hour for lab work, even when there's a hospital within a few miles of their home. When pressed about lack of access, Shaheen said,
there are some hospitals that are not covered, unfortunately, and I certainly hope that's going to change.
Jeanne Shaheen promised us we could keep our doctors and our health care coverage. Now she hopes we can get to a local hospital? Call Senator Shaheen at 603-647-7500. Tell her we need more than hope. We need leadership. Paid for by Citizens for a Strong New Hampshire.
Senator Jeanne Shaheen said, if you like your current health plan, you can keep it. That's not true, Senator. 22,000 New Hampshire citizens have been kicked off their insurance plans. Hospitals in Rochester, Concord, and Portsmouth, they aren't allowed to provide care under the exchange. Senator, you were wrong in your comments. You should apologize for your misleading remarks. I'm calling Senator Shaheen at 750-3004 and telling her I want my doctor back. You should too.
Paid for by SaberPac.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidate committee.
All of the music on this program comes to us through Creative Commons licensing from Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com. The opinions expressed on this program are those of the speakers, not necessarily those of CNHT, GraniteRock.com, or anyone else for that matter.
Rock Talk.